Well, welcome, oil runners. Today, I'm going to have to put this in the banner because I can't remember the long title. But we have the son of the former 8-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion, the King, Handsome Harley Race's son, Justin Race. So,
How y'all doing
hey,
out there?
Justin.
How you doing?
so, be-
Been looking
so
forward to
before we get
talking to
into
you.
absolutely, we've been waiting for this one. Um, Before we get into things, we want to make sure that the trolling does not happen because we are here to learn with each other, inspire each other, and grow with each other on whatever issues we have or whatever the stories. Everybody's story and everybody's voice has meaning, and we want to hear everything. So, um,
Looks
with
like
that being
we
said,
might be learning anatomy or about the skeletal system by the posters behind you.
yeah, yeah, I learned that on my own. Technically, I'm all in my it I'm going through a whole bunch of surgeries, so I also
Oh,
learned that on my own, and
oh, okay.
but my surgeons have been teaching me. All my doctors all around me. I have a neurosurgeon. I have all types of orthopedics. I'm about to go into a spine surgery in a couple
Mm-hmm.
days. So I had hand surgery, neck surgery twice, bariatric surgery. This is 4 years. Like about to have
Wow.
shoulder surgery next year. Oh yeah. So this right
You sound
here
like my
was just so
father.
I know. Really?
Oh yeah. I don't have
Wait,
any
we're,
surgery. I thought
we're
maybe that's why you had the skeleton up there. I was supposed to. You were going to point at every bone my dad's broke or something.
oh yeah, maybe. Well, this is the mo. Yeah. Well.
No, the other
Oh
way.
my gosh.
You
Yeah,
can pretty
yeah,
much
somewhere
point
around there.
anywhere. He's broke. He pretty much point anywhere, and he's broke it.
Yeah. Where does it hurt? I just circled the whole
Yeah.
thing. I'm like,
Well,
which
you're talking
one?
about all the surgeries. The last back surgery they did on my father, the surgeons came out after the surgery was over. They came out to talk to me, and one of them walked up to me and he said, we could have done that surgery at Home Depot."
Seriously,
Yeah,
I would have
all
been
they
like,
did was
look.
drill. They removed rods that he had, titanium rods that he bent up, just
Oh,
because he wasn't willing to get out of the ring, stay out of the ring. And they were put new ones in, and yeah, they were using drills and screws and saws, and that's why they do it at Home Depot.
listen, I think I might be your sister then, because I might take after him on that end of being stubborn, not going. I just keep doing, get it done, and keep going out. I can't. I understand where he's coming from.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, he had unlimited pain tolerance too. So
Okay, I wish I had that. I think that's a
yeah,
50-50 on
the
that
guy
one.
never was hurt. Nothing hurt. The only time the last back surgery, that last one, they had him kind of propped sideways in the bed, and when he was reeled in out of recovery and into like a room in intensive care, and he was that's the closest I've ever seen to him crying. I've seen him cry. Well, I saw him cry once after his father passed away. I'm told he had some tears in his eyes at my baptism, but that night after the surgery, he kept trying to grab a hold of me and pull me because he was so uncomfortable and it hurt so bad. And the doctors had him how they wanted him, and I kept saying, "Dad, you can't move." And they finally ended
Oh,
up giving him some sort of horse tranquilizer or something
a
to knock
horse
the pain down.
tranquilizer?
Yeah,
Jeez
not
Louise.
ketamine, but something like that.
Dude, that ketamine is so great. I get that now.
Yeah,
Like, that is a
what the
great
heck?
nerve reset. Yeah, it really the trauma that goes into the body, that it's a great nerve reset. And I'm not saying for everybody to go get it, but this is what my doctor recommended because nothing
Oh
else
no,
works.
oh no.
So, like,
Well, I'm sure you've heard the stories about my father's driving, and he smoked and he drank beer, and he tell people, "Well, I like to smoke, I like to drink beer, and I like to drive. So why not do all three at once?" Now,
well,
kids, this is the '70s. Different time, different age. I'm not
Uh,
I'm not promoting drinking and driving or smoking in any sort of the term, but this is 40 some years ago, 40, 50 years ago, and that's just what they did.
right.
And that was not
Yeah.
just wrestlers, that was all that. Yeah, there's a successful night at the race house. Dad looks like he was in a car wreck or something, but we're all smiling. I think that's in Japan. Third, I think that was his third world title. He beat Bubba in that at that match. He beat Giant Bubba
So
and took the now that
is that
trophy.
your mom
The
there?
huh, yeah. She was actually, if she comes by, she might poke her head in here on this interview at some point in time. Yeah, that's my mom. And me, I think that
Okay.
was 1980, so I would have been 9 going on 10, depending on what month it is. I'm born in October, so. But that trophy,
Nine
funny
going on.
story about that trophy. The In Japan, the office boys they are like the people that the younger guys that work for the All Japan Pro Wrestling. Um,
Hmm.
they were like up and coming wrestlers or just breaking into the business or whatever. They just called them office boys, and they carried our luggage everywhere, and they had translators with us everywhere. There was like we had like an entourage everywhere we went. And when we were leaving, the office boys carried that trophy onto the plane ahead of or right after my mom and I and my dad got on the plane, and then they got on after the plane with that trophy. You should have seen the look on the flight attendant's face.
Yeah, I'd be looking weird too. Like,
Where are we going to put that?
right. And
And of
aren't
course,
we
that my
not
dad,
supposed to
he
have
was the
weapon
dad was
lookalikes?
the what's that?
That looks like a weapon too, so it doesn't.
Oh yeah, yeah, the spikes on the top and all. Well, you could. The reason
Yeah.
for that was you could put the belt in there on those spikes. There's pictures somewhere where you put the belt, and so it like holds the belt perfectly.
Oh.
But yeah,
Okay.
I mean, they didn't say the flight attendant didn't say anything to us. They just argued with the office boys that were carrying it on. Of course, they were just going to set it down and get off the plane. They weren't flying with us, but we just took our seats in the front in first class, and they argued with the flight attendant on where it was actually going to go in the plane while we flew.
Like,
Well, the
well,
argument was in Japanese, so I don't know what they were saying.
oh shoot! At that point, I would have started learning that. Ear up.
Yeah, yeah. Most people, if they
Shoot.
saw their parent like that, their parent would have been severely beaten or in a car wreck or something like that, and that was kind of a nightly thing at my house. I always saw my dad like that. Scared me to death when I was a kid. I mean, I thought he was going to die. I'd cry and scream, and my mom would have to take me out of the arena or stadium or whatever.
Mhm.
But as I grew up, I kind of figured it out that people paid a lot of money to hate him,
Mm.
and that the more there was people hating him in the crowd, the more the arena or stadium was full, and the worse he got beat up, the more the people liked the match. And I just kind of started figuring it out that, well, I guess Dad gets paid to get hated. People pay good money to come and hate him.
Right. Yeah, and we get to eat. That's
Yeah,
like I get.
well, that's one thing that you gotta remember is um, you gotta remember who signs your paycheck as a
True.
wrestler, and it isn't the promoter, and it isn't Bubba in Japan, and it isn't Sam Mushnick or Jim Crockett or whatever. It's the people in the
Mhm.
seats.
Right.
And yeah, we when we go out to dinner when I was a kid, just go out family dinner. Dad's in town and talk about school or my sports or whatever. Um, People would inevitably come up and ask for autographs, and they'd uh my mom would say, "Can't they wait till we're finished eating or something like that?" And my dad would always say, "Yvonne, that person paid for this meal. That person pays for your home. That person paid for the vacation you just
Mm.
went on. You're always nice to these people, because if it wasn't for them, it wasn't for, as he called it, butts in seats watching me wrestle on TV or live, we'd live in a tent."
Wow. Yeah.
He
Hey,
had
that
the
makes
utmost respect for
that's a lot of
fans, and
wisdom.
he taught me that too. In fact, it's more of an honor when people meet me. And, oh, it's an honor to meet you. It's more of an honor for me, really. I tell them that. I said the honor is all mine. Um, Dad taught me when I was old enough to know enough. He taught me. He said he sat me down and he said, "Son, people are going to recognize you throughout your life. You're going to recognize your name, me, what have you." He said, "Whatever you do, unless you're on the way to the emergency room or you're late for work or something, give them their 5 minutes. Let them ask their questions. Let them give their opinions. Let them ask you questions. Uh, and let them, and you can ask them, whatever. Have a nice conversation with them. Because you know what?" I said, "What?" He'd say, "Those are 5 minutes they'll never forget."
That's
And
amazing.
so, yeah, so I've grown up that way. I mean, if someone's interested or someone recognized me, I stop and give them time to, you know, ask whatever they want or tell me stories or tell me how much they hate my father or whatever they want to tell me.
Yeah.
Um, because, like he said, that's 5 minutes. And and the honor, and like I said, the honor is mine. I mean, I've met, you know, uh, high government officials, CEOs of companies, very well respected, powerful people. And when they find out who my dad is, just for a moment, I get to like watch him melt into a little boy again. And they start telling
Right.
me, "I remember watching your dad with my father on Saturday mornings. We'd watch your father every Saturday." And, they just become little boys again, these huge, powerful people in $10,000 suits. They become a little boy right in front of me just for a few moments. And I mean, that's an honor.
Yeah. That's pretty cool though. So were you
Hmm.
as a like were you like as the kid of somebody, right, of a wrestler, and you was in the, everybody kind of knew you, like even the fans, all that stuff. So were you kind of like a famous kid in that sense? Like where
Yeah.
you walked around too, or you were just kind of hidden a little bit more?
Well, no, I was always in the dressing room where people knew who I was if I went out in the audience. Um, but I was around and in the dressing room and with my dad a lot more than a lot of wrestlers tell you the truth. They were on the road so much because they didn't want to be at home. My
Mm,
father, on the other hand, when he became like the first real traveling champion, and with that I mean he traveled all over the world. Singapore, the
mhm.
South Pacific and Samoa, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Europe, Canada, Mexico, South America. He traveled everywhere. He's the first champion to ever defend the title on all continents except Antarctica. And even then, he said, "What? You can't find a penguin?" Um,
Like that, you
so
wrestled the bear. Might as well do the easiest bird
yeah,
ever.
really.
Wrestle
Um,
it from the whale. Let's
so
put it that way.
well, yeah, well, he was such he. So they put him through so much. I mean, 300 nights a year, um,
Hmm.
an hour every night, 2 or 3 weeks traveling. In addition to that, they knew if they were going to they wanted him to be champion because they could count on him. If someone he since he was is so tough and so good and so legitimately tough inside and outside the ring, they knew that if someone would shoot on him and try to put one over on him and take the belt, all that would happen would they would get hurt. So they could
Hmm.
count on my father retaining the title even if someone had other ideas, so to speak.
Right.
So they wanted him to be champion, and he was champion for the better part of a decade. But if you're going to work, he traveled a 500,000 miles a year. If you're going to work that person that much, and they are a family-oriented person, they didn't going to work unless their family's with them. So the
Right. Yeah.
promoters were kind enough, whether it was Ron Miller in Australia, or like I said, Bubba in Japan, or anywhere here in the States, Graham, Crockett, Mushnick, they flew my mom and I with him often. So, people think you grow
Okay.
up and your dad is cool. Your dad traveled all over the world. He was world champion, but didn't it suck growing up without a father? And I didn't grow up like that at all. My mom, my dad, and I spent a lot of time together, and my father and I spent a lot of time together. It just wasn't at home. It was in museums and amusement parks and arenas and stadiums, of course, or
Yeah.
sightseeing or whatever. So we spent a lot of time together. It just wasn't at home.
So
So I
how
was
did you
very
deal with
lucky,
school?
and because of that, I became kind of a figure in the dressing room. Guys, if I wasn't with him, my dad said, "Where's the guys?" That asked my dad, "Where's Justin?"
The-
Because I grew up with a bunch of 300 to 500 pound uncles, and
yeah, nobody
when
touched
dad,
Justin.
yeah, well, yeah, when dad would go to work, he'd tell one of them, to watch me. I would basically babysit me while he went and wrestled. I mean, it might have been Brody, it might have been
Hmm.
Rick, it might have been one of the Funks. It could have been anybody. Any of those wrestlers. Hey, watch him while I go out there. And so I'd play with Uncle Brody for a while my dad wrestled.
Oh.
So yeah, I was very blessed. It was very unique. I was very blessed to have the childhood that I had. Um,
Mm.
I mean, sort of trials and tribulations. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I watching your father get hit over a head with a metal chair and blood flying everywhere and this and that is well, it's traumatic for a kid.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the person
It-
who's getting hit on the head though, like
yeah, well, yeah,
that
traumatic
didn't.
to my father, but my father was used to it. He was expecting it, and he knew how to take it. Only you can't tell
Hmm.
that to a 6, 7, 8 year old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people have asked me before of my life, and you had like an interview with somebody or whatever. Do you ever have any traumatic events happen when you were a child? And I'd say, well, besides watching my dad get the heck kicked out of him 6 nights a week, I might have been in a car wreck once.
Well, that's it. That's all it is. Just a
Yeah,
simple,
pretty much
simple
every night of my
traumatic.
life was a traumatic event.
It's like, yep, yep, yep. Understood. Like, so
They're
how did
looking at me
how
like
did
what?
yeah, like huh, it's just simple. It's our life. That's what it goes. I mean,
Yeah,
we were
I
supposed
was
to be
telling
nice,
him what
or
would have been weird is if my dad would have been home for dinner at 6 o'clock at night. Hey, my mom just walked in. We're on the. You mind if
You're
my
on the new
mom's
one.
my
Hi
mom?
there.
You got
absolutely,
it. There you
absolutely.
go.
Hi, mom.
This is
Hi.
Christinall. This is
Hi.
my mother Ivana.
Hi, Christinall.
Nice, nice to meet
There we
you.
go.
So we got the family affair here.
There you
Like,
go.
Can you hear okay?
Yeah, I can hear.
yeah, we were just talking about your lovely life in the wrestling world with your
What's
husband.
life like in the wrestling world?
We were talking about what a
Yeah,
wonderful life it was in the wrestling world.
Oh, sometimes it was pretty raunchy. He was
yeah.
gone all the time.
Well, we traveled with him, but
Yeah, but it was hard on a family because he was only home uh, 3 days a month.
Th-
So that put a damper
Three.
on it, but we did as much of the traveling with him as we could.
yeah, I was
Uh,
telling we were blessed that the promoters flew
Yeah,
us with him to travel so that he could be with his family. Once I got old enough, I mean, she didn't want to drag a 2 year old around the planet. That's a little difficult. But when I got 4, 5, 6 years old, where I could walk and maybe carry one of my own bags, or then we started traveling with him all the time. But when I was really young, no, he was gone all the time, and it was just mom and I.
yeah, yeah. So how did that take a? Did it take a toll on you as well? Like as a wife and a mother, like how did that really
Yeah.
affect you in different ways?
Did it take a toll on you as a wife and a mother, or how did it affect you?
yes, it did take a toll on me. I was responsible for everything. The bookwork, the home, the cars, my son, of course, and it took a toll on me. And then if you'd have a late flight or something or canceled flight, then that bashed that. But it was an enjoyable life, but yet it was a rough, hectic life.
I remember one time my mom. She was a
But
soprano, no, a soprano in the church choir, in our church choir,
What?
and apparently my dad called the church and they didn't know what it. I mean, you get transferred from person to person or whatever. And it's 11 o'clock. It's church time, and the ushers didn't know what was going on. They just knew that Harley or something about Harley had called the church, and they thought maybe he was in a plane wreck. They didn't know. So they went
No.
and they, kind of went in silently into the church and pulled my mom out of the choir, and they were there like to comfort her or whatever. She got on the phone. It was my father telling her to bring a jacket because we were going to the Chiefs game that afternoon when he got home. He got her out of church for that.
Seriously?
I
Oh
don't
my
remember
god.
that.
Remember that? He just
No,
said, bring me my windbreaker. It's cold out.
don't tell me.
That's that's like taking a kid out of school for ice cream somewhere and just don't tell mom at all for that one,
Oh yeah,
like
that's a familiar story. When Dad was in town, like actually in town at home, um, every once in a while I get to school at whatever it started at 8, like 8:15, there'd be a call from the whatever sound system in the school. Justin Race come
mm,
to the principal's office, and I didn't know that I had done anything wrong, or at least that I'd been caught doing anything wrong. So, all right. So I went into the office there. My dad's standing there. And he just looks at me and he kind of gives me a wink and a nod. And he said, "You got a doctor appointment." I was like, "Oh, okay." So he'd sign me out of school and he and I go out and play in the woods or go fishing or, just have fun, goof around all day long. About 4 in the afternoon, he'd call my mom, this is way before cell phones, right? He'd call her from a payphone and say, "I'll pick Justin up after school." She'd say, "Okay." And so he and I'd go home about 4:30, and she'd say, "How was school?" I'd say, "Fine." And
huh.
yeah, before we got in the driveway, though, he'd look, "Don't tell your mother." I'm like, "I'm not gonna tell her."
I'm learning so many things now in this late age in life.
I could
I'll do a
tell.
podcast and
So
I'll tell a "Don't tell your mother" story, and afterward, I'll talk with my mom, and "You guys did what?"
yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have to figure that one out.
Well, he
Yeah,
told
so
me
did you
not to tell you. He didn't say tell you when I was 35. He said don't tell you. So I had never told you.
oh man. But did you actually believe him, your husband, when he was telling
Well,
you he's gonna
sure.
pick up your son
Why did
or
I not believe him? I mean, I thought my son was close enough to me to tell me what was going on.
Well, I'm 6 years old.
oh
And
my
6-year-old, the 6-year-old isn't going to come up with a big story like that and lie. So my dad had me do the lying, and he just sat back and said, "Yep, that's what we did."
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So I
Shoot.
was like
So
the
what else is
messenger
there?
slash culprit.
Yeah, so while we're here in this little vein, what else did mom not know that she needs to find out now on Don't
Oh
Tell Your
God, I
Mother?
don't know. I've got so many stories. Did I tell you? I don't know if I ever told her this. When he was at home, whenever I went out, like when I got older in high school and whatnot, and I was going out with my friends for the evening, he'd always
Uh,
shake my hand when I was leaving. You have a good time tonight, and there'd always be a 50 or $100 bill in his palm that he'd give to me.
what?
And don't tell your mother. And Todd, did you know that?
No,
Oh, there you go.
how much money did you make?
Right.
Well, I spent it that night. Give a 17-year-old
Get rid of
$100,
the
that's gone.
yeah, get rid of the evidence.
Yeah.
You can't find it in the pants, find nothing in the laundry. Nope.
Oh no, I spent it.
I was on the council, 12 members on the council for that poor church. That the story that Justin told you before about bringing him a Chiefs coat or sweat coat
Bringing him a jacket because it was
jacket.
cold. We were going right to the Chiefs game. We were going from church to pick him up at the airport to the Chiefs game. And
Man.
he must have been coming from like Florida or something because he needed the coat. But he did stuff like that all the time. I mean, he was him, and if he needed something done, then he got it done. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to say he took advantage of his celebrity, but people generally did what he told them to do out
He
of
utilized
fear
it well.
sometimes, I guess.
He didn't tell. I didn't. When I told him what to do, he didn't do
Oh
it.
no, he was scared to death of you.
So she trained him how to do what he does
I
or
was
did.
Yeah,
the top of the family.
yeah. Well,
Nice.
when I was wrestling, he would teach me moves, and she was the dummy. I got to. He'd be like, "Now,
No.
Yvonne, shut up. Now, Justin, put your arm under her arm and pull it back." She's like, "Ow!"
Oh.
Yvonne, shut up.
Oh no, that was the him trying to pay
But
you
her
back
favorite,
for.
in all honesty, though, yes, and her favorite thing whenever he was he had very dry humor, but it was he. Do you remember E.F. Hutton, the financial advisor years ago? Their tagline was, "When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen." Then they'd have someone in a restroom and he'd say, "Well, my broker is E.F. Hutton," and E.F. Hutton says,
I
and the whole restaurant got quiet.
yeah.
That's kind of how Dad was. He never really said much.
Mm,
He just listened and just sat there. But if he what you could tell he was going to say something because he'd scratch his chin and you could tell he was getting ready to say something, and everyone would get really quiet, whether it was in the dressing room or in a restaurant, whatever. Because whenever he did say something, it was either hilarious or full of wisdom.
yeah.
And when it was hilarious, it was usually at he was usually poking fun at somebody. So my mom's favorite thing to say to my Harley, whenever he'd say, "Harley, stop that."
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what the hell's the difference? Excuse me. Well, we were flying from I believe it was Kansas City to Miami, and I think we were actually going on a vacation, like a cruise. He wasn't going to work, and there was these two little ladies that were sitting in front of in seats in front of us when we got on the plane. He opened up the thing and put his bag up on the in the um, baggage thing up above, and there's these two little straw hats up there, cute little straw hats, and
We went with
yeah, and then the two little ladies in sundresses, obviously who they were. So he puts the bag up there. He sits down. He waits till they close the door and the plane starts to move, so no one can get out of their chairs. And he leans forward toward the to the seats in front. I'm sitting on the window. My dad's here. My mom's in the aisle on the other side. He leans forward. He says, "I wonder whose straw hats those were I just crushed." And he
Uh
leaned back and grinned. The
oh.
little ladies were just all nervous. My mom said, "Harley, stop that." I was laughing
Like,
my butt. Thought it was hilarious. And of course, and that's all he said
oh,
the whole plane ride. That's all he said. Never said another word. We got there. They jump up and they look. Their hats are fine, of course. But that's just who he was, and that's why she Harley.
I love it. I love it. How did you and Mr. Race meet?
How'd you
What's your
meet?
love story?
Oh, we met on a blind date.
Oh, did
I
you want to
came
go
home
to the
from
blind
it
date?
was a flight.
Yeah, imagine seeing him at the door.
Yeah.
I came home one night from a flight, and my roommates.
She was a flight attendant back when they met.
And when
Okay.
I came home, my two roommates were watching wrestling. Well, we never watched wrestling. So I took my coat off and I said, "What are you doing watching wrestling?" And they said, "Well, that guy that's on TV saw your picture here today and he wants to see you. He wants to meet you." And I didn't feel good, so I went up to my room and I slept. And that was Saturday night. And Sunday, he kept calling me all day long. Finally, at 6 o'clock at night, he said, "Why don't you get dressed? Maybe you'll feel better if we go out for a piece of blueberry pie and a cup of coffee." I thought, well, I don't think I can get hurt doing that. And so I went
Okay.
to the door and I looked at him and I saw his blonde hair and I thought, I don't see anything real about it.
but
But we went out for
a
the
girl's got
blueberry
to
pie.
eat.
We had a nice time. He brought me home and he shook hands with me.
Uh,
But then that was the beginning of the relationship. And then I was playing hard to get and I told my pilots about it and they said, "Give the poor guy a chance." So I did.
oh,
And we got married
and you went
2 years later.
and you went
And I
all over
came
the
2 years
world.
after that.
Wow. Like, did you ever think that your life would be like this? Like before you met?
Did you ever think that your life, like then, did you think it would turn out to the traveling and all that it did?
No, I had no idea.
He was with Larry Henning then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the AWA tag team champion with Larry Henning, but world champions back then wrestled around the territory they were in and maybe around the country a little bit. It wasn't
Hmm.
until the 70s when Dad became the traveling champion that there was this all over the world business.
Okay. Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, it was
That's
kind of took everyone by surprise, by storm, however you want to say it. But all of a sudden, Harley was wrestling. We'd wrestle in in the Florida territory for, you know, a week, couple of days, whatever, in several different towns. Then he'd go to Texas. Well, then he'd go to Japan for 3 weeks, and then he'd come back, and then he'd go to Australia for a couple of weeks, and then he'd go. So
Mm.
he was all over the world all the time. And I don't think
Wow.
anybody, even in the wrestling, no one in the wrestling bit or anything, thought that was going to happen. But he was just a good draw because he he could let someone beat the heck out of him for 58 minutes, and then of course come back and win or get disqualified or whatever at the end. But everyone that left the ring came that close to beating the world champion. And boy, the next time he came to town, he was going to get beaten. So all the people came back to see him again and see him get beat. And he
Yep.
didn't get beat again.
Like, pay me money, we're good. I'll give you the show.
That was well, he had he had three concerns or three like rules for himself in the ring. The first was
Mm.
the safety of the fans, because him and Brody are working together, and Brody's swinging that chain around, and they start getting into the crowd and whatever. Dad's first order of business was to make sure those people were safe. His
Yes.
second priority in the ring was the safety of whoever he was wrestling. And you'll see that a lot when he body slammed Andre a few times, especially one in Houston in '79, I believe. He body slammed him outside the ring on the concrete. They didn't have mats around the rings back then. It was the ring and the concrete. And as he was taking Andre down, Andre's arm was straight out, like touching the floor, and it was in the way. I mean, he was going to rip a shoulder out or something. All that weight coming down on his shoulder if he didn't move his arm. So Dad
Mm.
actually stopped him for a moment. I'm picking up 500 and some odd pounds, 7'6" is one thing, but to
Jeez.
the weight, stop it for a brief moment on the way down to allow Andre to move his arm to go ahead and put him down. But that takes ungodly amount of strength to do that.
Yeah, that's that adrenaline, that
Yeah,
mom adrenaline lifting up a car to save their kid kind of
yeah.
thing that I would think of.
But that happened
Uh,
20 times a day to him in 1 hour match.
I couldn't imagine a job like that. I mean, the help, okay, but just watching even the stuff that's going on now with getting chairs upside your head and like you said, the ladders being there and throwing on the tables. I'm like, man, I'm just doing this. Like, ugh, how all
the
that
the
time?
old NWA world title belt. Um, I don't know if you know what it looks like, but it had a globe in the middle. It
Yeah,
was made of stainless steel, and it was like 3-dimensional, protruded from the belt, and it had a
yeah.
dent in it. And that dent was from Ric Flair hitting my father over the head with it. And
Oh,
after he did that night, I was back in the dressing room, and my dad's sitting there and looking at his head in the mirror. Turned around and he said, "Ricky, you hit me in the head with that belt one gosh darn time. I'm gonna cram it up your you know what."
so
They
what
never
did
hit him
Ricky
with it
do?
again. They never hit
I
him with
bet.
it again.
Well, I'm
When
sure he
the
wanted
when
to.
Yeah, when the boss spoke, people listened.
Yeah. So who was his least favorite out of all the people that he dealt with?
To wrestle, you mean, or just to
Yeah, like just somebody who
personally?
he.
Oh, some matches that he really had to take control of. I remember tag team matches in Japan. They'd have tag team tournament. Dad would be with Henning. Now this is a long time after AWA. This was when I was around. I was with him in Japan. We were with him in Japan in the '70s. And Brody and Stan Hansen would be together. And no, it was Dad and Nick Bockwinkel. That's who it was. And Dad told Nick, he said, "Let me go out there first and make sure these guys know what's going on," because Dad was the ring general. You did
Hmm.
what you were told in the ring when he told you to do it. And if you didn't, he would get you a headlock or an armbar or something. He'd put his, head down next to your ear and "Don't piss me off." And they wouldn't. So
Wow.
Dad wanted to go out first and establish a little bit of this, so this match didn't get nuts and out of hand with Stan and
Mm.
Brody. And Nick insisted on going out first, and they beat the crap out of Nick for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. Finally, he tagged out, Dad went over, grabbed a hold of Brody, and said, "Frank, you want this to go any farther, or you want it to stop right now?" And then it stopped right then.
Yeah, I bet.
So it
I would have
wasn't
had
like
that
he
now
didn't,
too.
he didn't like. It wasn't that he didn't like to wrestle them. He just some guys he had to control the match. Some of those guys just the adrenaline, whatever. Like Vader hurt
Mm-hmm.
people. When my dad
Yes.
became the manager for Vader, it wasn't necessarily. I mean, it was for Vader to learn from Dad, but a lot of it was Dad was there to protect the other guy. If you
Oh.
really watch the matches closely, when you see my dad intervene in Vader's matches, a lot of times, if you look closely, he's more protecting the other guy than he is egging Vader on, type of thing.
Hmm.
And
I'll
no
have to
one else
watch
would take
more.
the job. I mean, everyone else was scared to death of Vader, but Dad wasn't, because Vader was scared of Dad. They were
Right.
all scared of Dad. Dad and Haku, they're all scared of both of them.
Tag team. Like,
Yeah.
well, might as well.
Well, I mean, because they knew what they could do outside the ring. So, God only knows what they do inside the ring.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking about Hogan one time, not too long ago, and your dad was it at
Oh,
the bar?
well, when the WWE was first coming out, and they were just starting to grow and taking over territory after territory. Well, they had a show here in town in Kansas City, which is my dad's territory. And Dad went down to the matches, and of course, whoever let him into the building and let him into the dressing room. I mean, they recognized him. Obviously, they're not going to tell Harley Race you got to go in the front and buy a ticket. And he went into the dressing room, and when he walked in, there's stories told that he went in with a gun, and there's stories that he set the ring on fire and all this nonsense. But what happened was he walked into the dressing room, and of course it went totally silent because they knew that my dad was pissed, and it's not a good thing for Harley to be pissed because people get
Hmm.
hurt, and it didn't matter who you were. And Hogan was facing away from him, and he walked up behind him, and he just open hand, slapped Hogan on the rib cage so hard that it knocked him over. And Hogan hit
Oh.
hit the hit the floor on his butt and looked up and saw who it was and started scooting backwards. He's scared to death
Ah.
and just scooting backward, trying to get
Oh.
away from my dad. And Dad had made his point, and he turned around and he left. But that was
Wow.
that story has been blown up into a lot of stuff here. Yeah, I mean, people are like, I see on the internet people getting arguments over what kind of gun my dad had and all this kind of. It was a 45. No, it was a 38. No, it's like,
When in reality, it was a nothing.
yeah, it was an open hand, which probably
Yeah.
was more dangerous than a gun anyway.
All right. So there you have it, folks. You got that Hogan and that story. It is debunked.
Well, and if
It
you
is
look,
no.
if you Google some of my dad's interviews, he tells the story pretty much just like I did.
Yeah.
So I'll take his version over all this other stuff that I hear from a person's friend of a friend of a friend's roommate.
Yeah. For real. Like let's just get into the family. Like
Yeah,
be a
really.
family affair.
Yeah, I think we kind of know.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope you would. I mean, did you have any other children that were with you, like other wrestlers' childrens that were with you, like where you
Well,
can play
they
around
were
with, or
there, and I met them, like Dwayne, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson.
yeah.
He and I used to play together here in Kansas City. When Rocky Johnson, his father, would come in town, and Rocky and my dad would wrestle, there was a stage of this big velvet curtain that went across in Memorial Hall. That about 7,000 people, I think. And Dwayne and I would play backstage, and we'd peek through the curtain, and we'd watch what our dads were doing, and then we'd try to emulate what they did on the hardwood floor back there near the dressing rooms, beat each
Uh,
other up. But so yeah, Dwayne and I taught
so
each
would
other
you
how to wrestle.
now
Um,
that now that The Rock is who he is now, would you wrestle him like you did back in the day? Would you guys do that
would I
again or
wrestle
what?
him now? No, I don't
Yeah.
think either one of us or I think both of us are a little old to be wrestling.
Oh wow. And did you
But
mom?
so I mean, yeah, I made friends with some of the guys' kids, but again, I was a lot more around the guys than in the dressing room, like I said, because first of all, no one's going to tell the boss, no, your son can't come back here. And
Right.
second of all, that's the whole reason we traveled with him was to be together. So before his
Yeah.
match, we'd sit back there and we'd play cribbage and I'd hang out with the guys and sit on Andre's knee and he'd bounce you up and down and you almost hit the ceiling.
Yeah, I heard
And
that. Yeah, I heard
so,
that Andre the Giant was like a big sweetheart.
oh
Back
yeah, he
in.
was a big. Well, my mom called my dad a big teddy bear. Andre was a huge teddy bear.
Wow. So like all these wrestlers, were they just their persona? They were just totally different from their like
Not
real
all
life
of them.
versus.
Not all of them. There were some jerks. There were jerks in the ring, and there were jerks outside the ring too. But for the most part, especially the older guys, they knew, again, back to what I said, they knew who signed their paychecks, and they honored
Hmm.
those people. And if you wanted an autograph, rarely did uh, during when it was kayfabe, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever. Um, the heels and the faces usually didn't, even though they were friends in the dressing room, they didn't hang out together because it kind of messed up the whole heel face thing. If they went
Hmm.
out to dinner together or whatever. But then as television moved forward and you start seeing NFL, and you've got, uh, Lawrence Taylor and Franco Harris, the running back, and Lawrence Taylor is going to try to take Franco Harris's head off during the football game. But after the football
Right.
game, the game's over and, we're civil to each other. We're friends. So as
Huh.
TV started to show that other sports had, vicious battles while the clock was going, but afterward,
Yeah.
they're friends, it was a little bit easier. Um, Dad and I got in some trouble with Rick. The officers at first thought, "Oh my God, it's Harley and Rick." Well, I'll just tell you, we were leaving in an auditorium in somewhere in the Carolinas. I can't remember where. I was probably 6 or 7. I might have been 8. Dad had one of those Jeep Wagoneers that you turn the dial in the glove box from green to red, and it turned it to
Yeah.
emergency 4-wheel drive. All four tires
Yeah.
pulled at the same time like a tank. Well, Rick
Yeah.
liked Dad, so he bought my dad's, and Dad bought a new one. So we're leaving the building after he and Rick had just wrestled, and Rick pulled out in front of us, and then we pulled out behind him. He pulls up to a stoplight. Well, Dad stopped. He gets that grin on his face, and I'm like, "Oh boy, now what are we gonna do?" And he touches bumpers with Flair, and he reaches in that glove box and turns it on red and looks at me and says, "I wonder how powerful this thing is." And he pushed Rick through the stoplight. And
Nice.
when someone starts pushing you forward, your natural reaction is to jam on the brakes. So there's smoke and going everywhere and squealing tires and this and that. And after Rick finally he realized he was not going to stop this battering ram behind him, he uh,
Hmm.
he pulled forward and he took off. And it went from a tug of war to a car chase. Well, officer had seen this. So he comes roaring up behind Dad. Dad looks up and sees him like, "Ah, shoot," and pulls them both over. Rick didn't have to stop. It wasn't his fault, but he knew he'd get involved somehow. So Dad and Rick
Right.
get out of their Jeeps and they start walking toward the officer. The officer gets out and he sees them together and he doesn't know whether they're still continuing their match on the drive away
Oh,
from the
like that.
arena, only by cars, or
Right. Like,
what
do
was
I
going
interfere or
on. And his
not?
jaw just dropped. And then Dad and Flair obviously are standing right next to each other, not angry with each other or anything. So the officer pulled out his radio and he started calling for backup
Uh,
and like an APB and all this whatnot. But he wasn't calling the other officers to come and help make arrest. He was calling them to come and get autographs. So now you've got
that
20 police cars surrounding this area. It looks like a huge, traffic accident, or that they just caught some, escaped felon or something. There's cop cars everywhere. And so Dad and Rick are signing autographs. They're signing the officers had ripped tickets, blank tickets that they'd write out to people. They'd rip those off and turn them over, and Dad and Rick would sign the back of them. And
Yeah.
this went on for a while, and finally the officers started to thin out. They got in their cars and they drove off. And Rick got in his Jeep, and of course I had been out there. I was a little kid. I'm nosy. I just want to know what was going on. So I get back in the passenger seat. Dad gets in the Jeep and he starts it up, starts to pull away, and he looks over at me. Don't tell your mother.
Uh-oh.
I
I
knew
was
that
just going to
story.
ask her. Yeah, I was just going to
Yeah, I
ask
told
you,
her
did
that
you
one,
know
but
about that one?
You gotta go.
we didn't start until 20 after.
Oh, you didn't start. Oh,
Oh.
okay. I'm gonna have to leave. I've got something I've got to do. So it was
Oh,
so nice to
okay.
talk to you.
Yes, absolutely. It was definitely nice to meet you, for sure. I appreciate you
Okay.
coming on. It
Thank
Thanks,
was a
you.
nice
Mom.
surprise. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
Hmm.
Yeah, she was the real boss.
I could tell. I can definitely tell. Like, definitely.
Oh, it's just
Man.
that I mean, it just the way she said it when he did just the Henri, I guess is the word when he was Henri. Hurry, and he'd stop.
Yeah. I guess he knew it when that blind date, he knew.
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's
Well,
the one that'll keep me in line.
I still believe in the old adage that behind every great man is a great woman.
Yes. And hearing what
Supportive.
she had to say, like, and that she didn't, that was definitely a great woman to be able to just pull out. And that's a
Well,
lot of work for a wife and a mother to do.
and every it certainly wasn't always fruit and roses or whatever they call that. She had to watch him. I'm an only child. Well, I'm an only child because he got kicked in that area of his body so many times that was just the end of he couldn't have children anymore.
Right.
So he leaves the ring and he's this big legitimate tough guy brute, and he struts back to the dressing room and he gets in the shower and we whatever and gets changed and goes home, and my mom has to listen to the pain that he's in, watch him pee blood from getting kicked in the
Wow.
kidneys, or I mean, she actually saw the consequences of what happened, what
Yeah.
people didn't see in the ring. And I
Yeah.
mean, stuff that I
Definitely.
didn't even see. I was in bed, I had to go to school the next morning or something. I was in bed, but so she had to live through that pain and all that stuff that he was in with him.
Man. Yeah.
And it's hard to
That
tell
definitely.
someone. It's hard to tell someone that's half their blood just bled out of their body down their body to stop whining.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like,
He just got
yeah.
body slammed off the apron of the ring down onto a concrete floor. Oh, just buck it up and shut up. That didn't. If he was hurt, then he was hurt.
My gosh. Yeah. That had to be interesting on that end.
Yeah.
Just to just to watch that. And
Well, I mean, I when I was 8 or 9 or I don't know, somewhere in there, when I started to realize I started to understand the wrestling business, but I also understand it. I mean, how do you fake getting body slammed by Andre the Giant, who's 7 foot 6 inches tall? You add 4 foot arms to it. That's a long way down.
yep.
How do you don't fake that? So I pretty
No.
much resounded myself that by the time my dad was 50 years old, I'd probably be, and he'd probably be in a wheelchair. I mean, I just looked at the facts and said, well, your body can't take this for 300 days a night or 300 days a year. Then no
Gosh, did
human
he?
body can take this. So I suppose Dad will probably be in a wheelchair and probably won't have a clue who I am by the time he's 60.
Yeah.
And he
So
didn't.
are the
He
wrestlers
made it to
exhausted?
75, and he was a very spry guy. Last couple of years, he went downhill, but
Oh, he
I
did make.
would.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
he was 65 or probably closer to 70, and you've heard about his grip. He had that amazing
Hmm.
grip. He and Danny Hodge were the only two people I've ever seen that could take a stainless steel pair of pliers and bend the handles together.
Oh,
And so, I mean, I watched him break people's, like people had to be sarcastic to him or whatever in a bar, or even in the dressing room, and you'd hear their bones break as he crushed them with his hand. and he was probably 60, between 65 and 70, and not quite wheelchair bound, but almost. And I remember thinking, I got to be able to beat him now. So I'd put my hand up there. I mean, this happened many times. I was always goofing around with him, but I put my hand up there, and he'd put my hand up there, and he'd just take my hand and curl it up underneath, and he could squeeze his fingers together with so much strength that it could break your fingers. Not to mention this part. And he'd have me dancing on my tiptoes. This guy with a smaller guy now, a smaller version of Harley Race, much older, but still had massive hands.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I was, in my 30s or 40s or whatever, and I still couldn't even come close. He'd break every bone in my hand if he wanted to.
That's called the I'm still your father mode.
Yeah,
Just remember that.
definitely.
No matter
Definitely.
what I'm doing, I'm still your father, and I can take you out if I need to.
Yep.
Even at my weakest moments, I'm strong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
well,
I
that's
take
just, I
off of.
mean,
Like,
that's
okay,
why, he, when he went to the WWE, a lot of people think that he'd never had a gimmick. It was just Harley Race, Handsome Harley Race. He was never a gimmicky guy. 'Cause I remember
mm.
that question that someone asked earlier
Oh,
about the
this
dad
one
and
right here.
his, yeah, about what was it? Oh, hold on. I'll go ahead and fess up. I wear reading glasses.
Okay,
What do you
old
think
man.
is the difference between the gimmick and the man? Who do you believe is the difference? Well, the first question, he never really had a gimmick. He was just Handsome Harley Race, just a tough nose sob type of guy. When he went to WWE, this just didn't happen. This was months of negotiation on what he was going to be, because he told Vince, he said, "Look, I've had the world title of the largest and longest running wrestling organization on earth, the NWA. I've been champion
Hmm.
8 times. I've held every other title there is to hold in the world. I don't want your WWE or WWF at the time world title. I don't want any of that. I'm above all that." So Vince thought he'd be smart, and my dad was very uneducated. He got kicked out of school when he was in the 9th grade, for
Hmm.
punching the principal.
Of
Um,
course, doesn't sound like
so
anything.
um, so Vince, and he kind of had a little powwow, and they decided on this king business. Vince thought it was a neat gimmick, but it ended up not being a gimmick. It ended up staying with my father. He's still called the king. There was other king,
Hmm.
Randy Savage was the king, Haku was the king, whatever, but they aren't still called the king. Dad is called the king. So
He's the
Dad
goat.
knew that
He's the first
Vince
of
thought
the.
it was a gimmick. Dad knew it was something that would stick with him the rest of his life. It's like Arnold
Yeah,
Palmer's the king of golf, or Richard Petty's the king of auto racing. Yeah, there have been people that have won more titles, or Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus, whatever, but there's still one king, and
yeah,
that's who Dad is.
man. Yeah, he sound real. Yeah, definitely, definitely real, and not a
They call
character.
him
Yeah,
legit tough.
yeah. That I. Wow. I mean, I traveled around the world, but it was because of military. But you had that. Do you think it would be
Oh,
the same almost with between traveling as a kid? Um, I had to travel every 3 years. I know you
yeah.
traveled a
Well, thank you
lot.
for your
I
service,
mean,
by the way.
oh yeah, it was my dad's service, but
Oh, okay. Well, thank him.
but yeah, no, as a kid, I was a military brat, so I had
Yeah.
to get up and go all the
Well,
time
there was a
too,
little
and
bit of difference in that we went from territory to territory week by week. And you asked me earlier if I had friends, other wrestlers' friends,
yeah,
as kids that are friends. I never had time to establish friendships, because we'd be in a territory, we'd move on. We'd be in a
same here.
territory, we'd move on. So we were never any place long enough to, you know, establish any, friendships, except for, of course, in Kansas City, where I had my high school and grade school, whatever friends.
But with you being gone for all those days of the year, how much time were you in school though? Like,
Oh, I was taken out of school a lot. My mom was my tutor. The
okay,
teacher
so
and her
you were
would
kind of
go over
almost
lessons, and
homeschooled.
they'd go over the homework and the lesson plans, and I'd take it all with me, and every day while we were wherever we were, in Singapore or wherever we were, every day for an hour or two, I'd have school time.
Wow.
And my
Do
mom
you
taught me.
did you ever wish that you were stabilized like the other like the other kids were,
Well, I didn't know any
that
difference.
normal, watching other kids
Yeah,
do
I didn't.
that
It
normal
seemed weird to
statuses,
me, like to always go, go over to their house and their dad was always there. That always kind of seemed weird to me. Like,
right?
don't y'all
Like
get
I
sick
feel
of
the
being with
same
each
way.
other all the time?
Okay.
Like I said, it would have
Yeah.
been very weird for me to have my dad at home for dinner at 6 o'clock. That would have been weird. It was
And like
much.
Thanksgiving and all that stuff, and
Well, he never worked Thanksgiving. He never worked Christmas. But what was normal for me was tracking my dad down in who knows where, Australia, to say hi to him.
so pretty much you were living every other kid's dream
But
on
it
that
was
end.
normal to me. I
Yeah,
didn't know any
yeah.
better,
So you were the
or I
quote
didn't know
unquote
any different,
popular.
I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To a famous wrestler, that everybody knew, and
Hmm.
kids going there, and it's like, oh my God, you are
The only
that's
people
your
that called
dad.
him Harley, the only people that he was the boss, Mr. Race, or the king to all the guys and pretty much everyone. The only people that called him Harley were my friends because he was just Harley. He was the guy my mom and my dad made chocolate chip pancakes in the morning after a sleepover. He was just that guy.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they called him Dad. They called him Harley, whatever. But they didn't think any big deal of it because I was fortunate enough to go to the same school district from like second grade on. So my friends, besides the kids moving in, my friends grew up with me and grew up with him, and it was no big deal. He was just Harley.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's got to be, man. Um, did it affect you in any way as an adult? Um, with
Mm.
establishing relationships and stuff like that, or
Oh,
in
I
work
mean,
and
normally, I dated a girl for like 6 months one time, and she never figured it out. And all of a sudden, she put two and two together, my last name and whatever. It's like, oh my God, your dad! My favorite wrestler was Danny Little Bear. And I'm like, you didn't know
oh
that that's who my dad was? I mean, I don't go around, advertising. So
no, so you kind of hide it until like the right one comes along and be
I
like,
don't hide it.
okay,
It's just if
maybe
someone asks, then I say yes. I don't hide it, but I don't also wear a sign that say this is who I am.
right, yeah. Huh, that's yeah. Do you have any kids or anything that?
No, I do not. Not yet, anyway. I could always have one, but no, I do not. Had some
So he
stepchildren once, but we got divorced.
okay.
Well,
We're definitely gonna
I'd love to continue this again sometime.
absolutely, yeah. Definitely would love to have you back on and
Okay.
really really talk and have your mom back on. I got some questions. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I'll get her back on here. Next time we're on, I'll make sure she's available.
yeah, we need a family affair here. Like we,
There you
we
go.
definitely, yeah, that was definitely a surprise. I did not
Well,
expect
I
that.
talk
But thank
about my family. My family was just the three of us. When people talk about their family, they talk about all the groups of people or whatever. My family was the three of us.
yeah, absolutely. Definitely would love to hear her side as well on,
Okay.
especially being that wife, like you were saying earlier about how she saw that other side after he got done with a fight and, having to deal with that and how what she really felt inside, having to watch her husband, the love of her
Yeah.
life, like kind of getting
Yeah.
hurt all the time, as
Yeah, it
a
wasn't easy. Well, it wasn't easy for me either to see your dad get the snot beat out of him a lot, but that's just the way I grew up, and that's the cards I was dealt, and they were very blessed, very unique cards.
yeah, absolutely. Well, we thank you for being on here. Is there a legacy that
Absolutely,
you would love to
Christinall.
leave?
What's
Yeah,
that?
is there a legacy that you would love to leave on this earth?
I just want to make sure that no one ever forgets who my dad was and what he did for the sport of wrestling. I mean, I'm a businessman. I'm not the. I was state champion and national champion wrestler when I was in high school. I wanted to be a pro football player, but I got hurt. But as far as a public legacy, I just want to make sure that people know that I did everything in my power to make sure that my dad was never forgotten.
Okay. And you said you were writing a book about
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
yes. My mom's writing a book called Life with a King, which is a memoir about
Hmm.
her and her life with my father. And then mine, of course, is Don't Tell Your Mother. And it's a series of stories that always Dad and I just doing our thing. And don't tell your mother.
You should make a movie out of that. Don't tell
Yeah,
your mother.
yeah, wouldn't that be
That
interesting? All right,
would be
Christinall.
interesting.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. Yeah, I had fun.
Yeah, me too.
And
So,
thank you to all you folks out there in TV land. I'm Justin Race. I don't hide it on Facebook or whatever. And on Instagram, Justin Race or Just Bob's is actually my handle or whatever they call it. But if you type in Justin Race, you'll get me. So
okay.
yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody. And like I said, everyone gets 5 minutes. So if you ask me a question, I'll do my best to answer it. Might take a week or two because I get a lot of them, but I'll do my best.
Oh man, you should do a Reddit page. Just
Yeah.
just to send everybody to a Reddit page and just like, look, just
Well, I'm gonna get
go
on
through it.
Cameo so I can start doing some cameos for people.
Oh, that would be cool. That would
Yeah.
be cool. See, now you heard it first. There you go.
Yeah. Look for me on
Cameos.
Cameo here coming up real shortly.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a nice evening.
Thanks. You too.